the cloud now. All right, like I said, I've been flying about across various parts of Canada and being on holiday. So this was on the calendar. I think we delayed it once, but we decided to do it today regardless. And, I think what we're going to try to do in the future is there's going to be certain events that we do that are quite public. And there are going to be certain events that we do that we bring together a group of people, small group of people. I'm more focused on the conversation and hopefully recording something that we can look back on and go, wow, okay, that was an interesting piece that we'll post on things like Medium and YouTube and what have you. So today we're going to talk about game theory, risk, and reward. I am a huge, and I mean huge, poker player. Not to the point where it's any kind of social condition, hopefully, but so I practice this every single Friday night. I'm gonna just pause for a couple minutes to see if some of my other colleagues will be showing up here. I'm gonna stop share for a second. And we've got two of them today. One of them is on this topic, and then one of them is on heuristics, shorthand type of stuff. So, and fire be damned, I'm gonna start regardless. So let's kind of I guess Bud, you're out here. I'm not too sure if you can chat. Certainly we had something like 16 or 17 people sign up for this, but sometimes late summer gets a little bit crazy. If you can, what do you know about game theory, risk, and reward, Bud? And if you can, that's cool too. I will say this is the 40th in our series of craft building experiences. Our aim is to make people smarter about a range of different subjects. About 12 of them are listed below here. And it's as much as we've surfaced intelligence, new insights, new foresights, this is kind of more the making of. How do we get more talented in terms of some of our skill sets? And so, this is our ongoing mission. We started doing these maybe September of last year. And so we've almost come to a full calendar. We've done about 40 of these now. And we've done anything from foresight. We've almost been climbing alphabetically. And so we've done the A's and the B's and the C's and the D's and the E's. We did hope and courage and faith last week on Clubhouse. This week we're doing this one. We're going to do one a little bit later on tonight called heuristics. And we're going to do, and I'm going to get out of here just for a second because I think some of my fellow colleagues are joining us. And so, we're going to do a few of these later on tonight. And I hate Zoom sometimes because it always does that to me. So, like we said here, never go wrong with Ernest Hemingway, and a quote here, we've all become apprentices in a craft where no one ever becomes a master. Certainly on this subject, I am not the master. It's funny, when you peer on LinkedIn, you see a ton, and I mean a ton of people with letters behind their names that look into the subject on a much more deeper basis than me. And so we usually start our subjects with a bit of good news. I know we're trying to get Artemis launched today, I guess, and with the hopes that we're eventually going to make it to the moon. But the James Webb Hubble telescope, I think it's just James Webb, actually detected carbon dioxide in an exoplanet's atmosphere for the first time. So the building blocks of life have been found in the far outer space, somewhere about 700 light years away from us. So it's getting us closer to the question, does life really exist out there? And I got to be honest, I got to say a defiant yes. That's my point of view, but I'm willing to engage in some game theory on that as well. Welcome, Nicole. Just thanks for joining us. How are things in LA?
They are good. All is well on the West Coast. Well, at least at my beach. How's everybody else?
I don't know. Why don't we?
I don't think I've ever met Bud or Basir.
It's an alliteration webcast here today. Hey, Basir, how are you?
Hello, awesome, and I'm glad that I got the invites for the Zoom because I was really preparing to send you an email. So you have that perfect timing. So thank you for the invite. I'm a crisis management guy, expert, but have multiple hats. But foresight evoked almost 20 years ago. Actually, during Y2K, you have the whole Nostradamus things. So ever since then, interest and practitioner in foresight. Thank you.
Very good. Awesome. And I know foresight plays a little bit into the subject we're talking about today. Bud, I know you're trying to get on earlier. Can you verbalize now?
Basically, I've on the. Did you ask me?
Sorry, there's Basir and Bud on our call today. I was asking Bud if he can actually verbalize, but I'm not too sure. You there, Bud?
Oh, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Bud.
I think there might be headphone issues there, perhaps. Well, let's keep going. We'll see if Bud can join us, and if not, he can use hand signals or whatever. One of my favorite, I guess, speakers, authors, I don't know what to call her. She's done a whole bunch of stuff, is Jane McGonigal. I think she strips it down to its bare essence here. When you look at game theory and whether it's a game or this real game of life, we really strip it down to four things. There's a goal, there are rules involved, there's a feedback system that says you're doing bad, good, or indifferent, and there's voluntary participation. And I know on that last one, sometimes, the Russia-Ukraine war, I think one was voluntary. I think perhaps the other one might not have been as voluntary. So just trying to get a grounding. I know, Nicole, we talked about hope, faith, and courage and getting to some definitions on that. Are we more baked on the definition of what game theory is?
Well, I mean, guess we should ask everybody. I think we might as well just define it so that we're all on the same page and what we mean and how it's applied, how we're applying it.
Well, tell you what, I've got a couple of slides. We'll then reflect on it and see if it makes sense. I know I mentioned my poker play off the top, but I think in terms of movies, my best example on game theory is The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Anybody seen the movie? An absolute classic, right? And I know Bud's trying to make it in here, so on a different wavelength. Let's see if I can get out of here. Yeah, I could be frozen. No, there we go. And Bud. Okay, let's see if you made it in. Here we go. So Good, Bad, the Ugly. There's for anybody that remembers the scene, there's Lee Van Cleef. There's what's his name again? And I'm gonna get his name wrong, but really good kind of veteran character actor. And then there's Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood puts the name of where the reward or the big fortune is found. He puts it. It's the name of the gravestone that's nearby. And so he puts it in the middle. And so now the two other players have to think, would he actually put the stone in the middle for real or for not? And so their game theory decision-making was, well, I can't really trust that he put the name of the grave there. And if I kill him now, he's going to die and I'm never going to know where this grave is. So obviously Clint Eastwood being wise about this and also throwing another factor into the decision-making, which is, he took the bullets out of one of the person's guns. And so obviously what happens is I hope I don't ruin it for anybody. So shut your ears off if you haven't seen it yet. But what happens then is they both try to kill each other. One of them does kill the other person. And Clint Eastwood has the safe understanding that no one was ever going to shoot him, because if by shooting him, they would have lost the chance to win the reward. So a great piece of kind of game theory and cinema. I'm not too sure if anybody else has a great game theory and cinema moment. Any thoughts?
No, if you can hear me.
I can hear you now, Bud.
Good.
Okay. I don't know if you had a movie moment, but let's keep going. I know, Nicole, you're going to start showing up a little bit more on some of our different webcasts here. We are working on a podcast together called Intrepid, which is going to be amazing. And we've got a couple of these coming up this week. One tonight, later on tonight, called Heuristics, and another one later on this week on hypnosis. Welcome into the lurch, if you will, Nicole.
Welcome into the lurch. That's what you're titling it.
Yep. Welcome into the lurch.
I like that. I think that's a great place. I don't mind lurching.
All right. It's funny. I know the person.
Oh, what is going on with this image? This image is way too intense.
Well, I know the world rock, paper, scissors champion from the year 2012. And so I don't know what was going on in his hands, but generally rock, paper, scissors is a game of, game theory as well, right? Particularly if you played a lot with somebody. I like to think the more you play with somebody, rock, paper, scissors, the more you know that what they're going to throw down. We going to do this together right now, Nicole, or not?
Yeah. No, I think I was just thinking, I think this should be our thing. I think we should just keep doing this. So then we just call
all right,
it.
well, all right. It's
Visually.
on the count of three, though. Don't wait for three and then go. All right. So are you ready? Best out of three here. All right. 1, 2, 3.
I can't
All
see
right,
you.
we're both rock. Let's
let's
all do it together, I guess. Basir's in it on scissors. I think we both knocked your scissors out for sure, Basir.
Yeah, we
and
both choose rock, which is the obvious choice.
I can't see what Bud's doing. So
Oh,
All
I'm just
right.
sitting here.
Ready? Go.
let's do one more, Nicole. Let's see who wins it for good. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
I can't see what you
do it
did.
again. 1, 2, 3.
What did you
We're
do?
never going to decide this. I keep on doing scissors.
Oh, you do? See, we have the same strategy. That's hilarious.
Oh man, it's like trying to beat myself. How can I beat myself, right?
Yeah, you got your match, Moffat.
All right, there's other games too. For those that know, this is Rounders. This is my doppelganger, Matt Damon, and at least in a different life. And certainly poker is completely based on game theory, right? Sometimes it has nothing to do what's in your own hand. It has more to deal with how are you reading the other player and some of the either strengths or insecurities that they might be playing with. So any poker players here?
Well, too much.
All right, we'll
I
have
stopped
a beer
smoking.
afterward.
I stopped smoking about 40 years ago. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes, lost $400, and had to never admit that to my wife, but I haven't smoked since.
All right, Basir, poker player?
Not poker player, but very much into mind reading. So you can call it that.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And Nicole, have you been known to play around the green felt?
I don't have the patience for certain games. Like I'm a strategist at heart, so I don't need to play games. Like I'd rather put the strategy to work in building shit.
All right. Well, we'll get into other hobbies on another webcast, I presume. But there's a lot of different terms that are being associated with this. I think one of the biggest ones is prisoner's dilemma, right? I think we've all heard about, whether or not you both go to jail, you both go free, or you create some version of a scenario where either one's getting more time or less time based on what the choices are in front of you. There's things like zero-sum game, science of strategy, Nash equilibrium, an acceptable game, and a whole bunch of different things involved in game theory. When I say game theory, Basir, what comes to mind?
Calculations, Iceman, I guess completely concealing and being in kind of a stealth mode of your emotions. But most importantly, I guess cognitive superiority, decision superiority, because I've trained I trained insurance executives in thinking skills. Now, a lot of the, you can imagine the political, economic, business risks associated with Turkey, and especially, given a lot of variables and so forth. So everyone was using same thing. So just novel, disruptive stuff so that they could be a few steps ahead, almost thanks to that, borrowing from the example you've given, practically disarmed the other guy.
I love it. There's a lot of really good stuff in what you just said that we'll unpack, I think, over the next half hour. Bud, what do you think about when you think about game theory?
Well, really, to me, it's just some kind of calculus for decision making, right? Like I've been away from this for 20, 30 years, but used to be involved with a lot of actuaries. I love numbers in business, so I'm here to listen, really.
All right. And Nicole, what do you think about when you think game theory?
I'm here to discuss that, not proclaim
All right.
it. Yeah, do it.
All right. Well, I mean, I think you saw in one of the things, the science of strategy. I think oftentimes, there's a lot of uncertainty out there that can't be navigated, but there is quite a bit of certainty that can be navigated, or at least be modeled and looked at. And so, so I think, how people make decisions is kind of fundamental to what game theory is all about. From a context standpoint, it factors into so many different parts of how we operate in our world. I can think of about at least 15 different industries that have a huge chunk of their decision-making calculus based on game theory. Military is a great one, right? Right now it's playing out in terms of Ukraine and Russia. Can one withstand the other? Is it a war of attrition, or is it something that, I think in the early days, Russia said, you know what, as long as we could take the capital, they'll fall in 3 days and then we'll install a puppet government. Well, it didn't really happen that way. And so game theory was at work there. Certainly I've been in worlds where, you're looking at whistleblowing, right? Who is going to be the whistleblower? And sometimes the whistleblower has so much of a penalty that ends up being thrown at them that everybody stays mum on something, right? If you look back at the financial crisis of 2008, generally a lot of people knew what was coming. They just didn't want to holler that, the sky is falling, because it would have inflicted on them more personally than others. So when I think about other things in the world, we've got evolutionary biology, where it's, which kind of species may go extinct versus other ones that can adapt. What are some other kind of areas of the world where game theory may play a role? Basir?
I would say infinity games. In military, there's a concept of infinity games that, even though there are certain wars and so forth, they continue on being fought, and competition. So you could think, I'm thinking of Cold War. I mean, it ended with with the collapse of the Soviet Union. However, they were just disarmed, and they were shocked. And gradually, they just pulled it back together, realized that perhaps capitalism is not the best choice for them, because there's always that Tsarist culture, haves and have-nots. And same thing with China. I mean, in the 1970s, there were so many people riding bicycles and so forth. But then once they've kind of gotten, their economic independence, maturity, and competitiveness, they just hold everything on to military. So I guess chronologically, we may be in 2022, but there's still the 1950s and in Korean War. So that's the kind of infinity game I'm talking about.
Very cool. And I guess when you pivot more to, I guess where most of our guild spends their time in business, you can look at pricing decisions, right? We're looking at one right now. Can I fundamentally pass along all these increased supply chain costs to my customer? Do I swallow them myself, or do I pass them along to somebody else in the rest of the food chain? That's certainly one thing. One area for me, which is really interesting, is the environment, right? How are you going to get a world that, if there isn't enough of a penalty, there's too much of a reward for cheating? And so you've got a game theory in terms of, I'm going to keep performing badly as a player here because the penalties aren't so high that it's going to change the way that I do business. Nicole, any kind of thinking in terms of where game theory may play a role in your world?
Well, no, that wasn't where I was going to go. But I mean, my question is this: what's the actual difference between just normal strategy and game theory? Because what you're outlining is just a lot of just strategy. So are we replacing game theory with strategy in as a kind of strategy, or I am curious about what the distinction is here. And I like the examples of game theory, but I think I have an idea of what those distinctions would be, but I think it's worth it to actually articulate that, because I don't think that just any strategy is the same as game theory. And the things that I like about game theory are a little bit different than just typical strategies, as well as the things that I don't like about game theory. So I'm asking, what's the difference? Because everyone's just kind of describing strategic decision making, which I don't think that's really what game theory is about, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it's certainly a subset of strategy, or at least to how people make decisions, right? And I guess it could be, it could be for games, it could be for experiences. So it's not exclusive to the strategy domain, I think, but I think you advance forward to 2 slides. Sometimes people like context before they get the definition. Here's a definition that is generally agreed to, right? It's a framework, right, for understanding choice between different players. They could be competing against each other. They could be cooperating, depending on how they see the game that they're playing. Game theory helps players make optimal decision making when certainly done in an environment where it's actually rational, and it's confronted by independent and competing actors in a strategic setting.
Hey, Sean,
So that's kind of, yeah.
How much of this includes modeling and numbers? How much of that is because that's where my mind goes with game theory.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the formative base.
Mathematical. Yeah, I like that, because it stems from mathematical science.
The formative basis to this was mathematics, right?
Right.
A guy named John Van Neumann. And then, as you know, actually, I'll pivot to him. I think there's somewhere in here. Who's this guy?
Oh,
Or the
that's
movie.
yeah. You love your movies, don't you? Anyway, it's the Gladiator, Russell Crowe.
Well, you got the guy.
Yeah,
and it's Mind, the Beautiful Mind, or
you got there, bud. You're back on my bar
I
trivia
can't
team.
remember the name of the guy who invented this machine that actually solved the code, the Russian code. What was his name?
So the guy's name was John Nash.
John Nash.
So
there we go.
if you read anything on game theory, John Nash's name shows up right, left, and center, and certainly
right.
Fundamentals in mathematics for sure. But I think it's probably disingenuous just to call it a mathematical art or discipline, because if you think about some of the best mathematicians ever, they are such conceptual geniuses that it's not just a mathematical game. It's almost, can you kind of rise above the game that you're playing and see it from something from above and see how it's really being played, would be my way of saying it.
I came across such a flag officer, that fits right into the description. Air Force Academy, U.S. Air Force Academy graduate, but majored in mathematics, and but really the strategist, somebody who comes up with novel ideas, pilot, but most important of all, really adapt to novel situations.
For sure, right? And I think there are some assumptions, though, that people make about game theory that probably need to be in place for them to actually make some judgments on it. And typically there's about 6 of them. One, the action and choices of all the participants affect the outcome of each other. And so, they are interdependent in this game. They will usually at least have 2 or more choices. If you only have one choice at the start of the game, you're certainly a dummy in the game. You don't really affect either your own kind of fate or the fate of others. Players within the game are rational. I think we've seen a little bit in the US political scene, maybe over the last 2 decades, that maybe it's not entirely rational. So it's tough to apply game theory to the US political scene. A little bit of a personal commentary there. Players know the rules of the game, or at least they think they know the rules of the game. And then players, if they're rational, will try to strive to maximize their payoffs. And so whether that means both of you win, somebody wins and somebody loses, or it's a race to see which person doesn't lose as much as the other person. All of those different types of games apply. Does this make sense to you in terms of just a definition or some boundaries in terms of what game theory is?
I would
Yeah, I like
disagree with, sorry, please go ahead,
Sorry.
Bud. I have
No,
spoken for-
I
no,
have-
please, I insist, sir.
No, I just agree. I like this. It makes sense to me. I like pictures. I got it.
Well, so does Sean. He
Oh.
loves those his pictures.
I've noticed that.
We are living in a visual world, people. If 2022 says anything,
Yeah.
and
I
Monsieur,
feel
were
pretty
you-
bad. I
I'm
feel
done.
pretty bad that I didn't use any visuals on a recent lecture I gave, and mea culpa, mea culpa. But yeah, so players within the game are rational. Players basically want to win. So they're going to be irrational, ambitious, passionate. So I guess it's kind of like the economy being rational, that when you leave it to its own devices, that it's going to pick up and find the equilibrium and so forth. No, I mean, it's just basically dog eat dog world, or just outright cannibalism. I mean, going back to 2008 and people basically churning toxic assets and so forth. And so it's kind of like WMDs, and it surely it turned out that way. Thank you.
I like it that you brought this up, because I think this is the problem with game theory, is it depends on
Right.
what the game that's being played and how it's rigged, and the rules that are designed in order to rig the system in a particular way. And so I think that the worst of capitalism and greed happens in game theory, and even marketing, and pretty much any industry, right? Because you're working with data that you know to be true, even if that is and you're trying to manipulate that data to the advantage, to whatever your outcome is, which is usually just increase of profits. It's not actually increasing, the health of society and doing more complex system, meaning human systems, and how that's integrating with commerce systems, and how that's integrating with, the planetary, our Earth systems, you know what I mean? And so I think this is where it could go wrong. And I think it mostly goes wrong when it's applied in context of business. So I wonder if there's any examples of people who've really done a great job with game theory and really made it not about greed or just only profits.
Well, I mean, you mentioned natural systems, right? I think natural systems also play by the world of game theory, right? We've seen different species go extinct beyond anything related to capitalism or any kind of political strata. It's oftentimes think about those, I can't remember what they're called, but I'm going to call them tick fish, like those ones that clean like the skin of the apex predators that they're doing. At some point, some brave fish had to go, I think I'm going to do this. It's going to help this bigger fish here, and he's not going to eat me in return. Now, I don't know who that brave fish was hundreds of millennia ago, but man, oh man, those people have cleaned up now, because essentially the tick fish, that's their entire food system. And if the sharks or the rays that they feed off of go extinct, they probably would go extinct as well. So I think
When you're watching election night returns, are they gaming? Because a lot of times they can really predict where things are going until something they can't predict, and then they get into the irrational. Well, someone in this county acted this way.
Well, I mean, I think in some respects the polls themselves play a role in the game that's being played, isn't it, Bud? I mean, if it's been well known that if you know that somebody's either going to win or lose, and it's categorical, you might be less inclined to vote, or you might be more inclined to vote against your best interest because you want to vote the other person out, and a range of different things. Certainly, when you looked at Trump versus Clinton back, how many years ago was it now?
16.
6 years ago, probably.
In 2016, yeah.
If you put $2 in Vegas at 8 o'clock at night, the night before the election, you could have got 5-1 odds on Trump losing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, I mean, I don't know if that's not rational, but certainly there's surprises in the games of politics or economics or whatever. I think if you ask somebody 10 years ago, what would be the value of this thing called Bitcoin, right? Would anybody say,
$22,000.
oh my Lord, well, I mean, I think it got up to about $80,000. I think
Yeah,
even
it
the
dipped to
most,
22 today.
it looks like you've got a position there, bud.
Quiet.
But I think there's almost a mutual destruction there amongst people that own Bitcoin, right? Like if I don't believe in it anymore, then we all fail, right?
Yeah.
So I think currency is just as much about the trust that you put in it. I know oftentimes when you think about game theory and some of the bad stuff that Nicole had just mentioned, there's this acronym that gets used, IBG, YBG, which means I'll be gone, you'll be gone, right? I don't want to ruin the Breaking Bad finale, but there was a excellent, not Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul finale. There was an excellent example of shared mutual destruction. If I'm going to jail, you're all going to jail. And so I won't ruin it for anybody. Any situations where you go, God, I've been in one of those situations before. We didn't want to rat out somebody because if we did, we'd all be fired. Any thoughts in terms of an IBG, YBG?
Actually, that's not something I'm very proud of, but in middle school, a group of students created a cabal that were stealing exam questions by bribing the Xerox guy in our school. Now, when they were keeping it a secret, they lived happy forever. However, once that it leaked to several classes and so forth, so there were 9 classes at the third year of middle school, everyone started pitching in money. But as the money was flowing in, nobody knew whether that money was going to the Xerox guy or whether it was going to be pocketed. Of course, everybody kept it a secret, but supposedly there was going to be 3-4 people going and meeting the Xerox guy at the train station. But because nobody trusted each other, there were like 30 students went in. And because of the large number, I'm a Gen X. I was born in 77. So the train station was ambushed by the teachers. They entered from both the north and the south entrance of the train station. And as the one train came in, and as it was leaving, 25 managed to jump into the train, and the other 5 stayed.
This is something they should make at least a mini series or something out of this. This is the stuff of legend here. Wow.
This is being recorded.
Oh,
you are recording this.
I hope it gets deleted.
All right, we'll edit that part out. You'll keep all of your massive designations and degrees. Just going a little bit further into it, what's the value of game? I mean, we've talked about some of its bad applications, and certainly I agree with Nicole, the context of either business or politics or a few different things. People, we say people can game the system, where essentially they're trying to be really good game theorists and actually do something to the detriment of others. Why is it important to know all of this stuff, though? Because I mean, whether it's badly practiced or not, there's certainly motivations behind what we do that can be modeled, can be looked at, and can be seen ahead of time before things happen. So what's the value?
Provides an illusion of certainty. I think managers love this kind of stuff. Managers love data, no matter how suspect the data is. They all believe they're left-brained. They love this stuff.
There's some editorial in that, bud.
There is.
I agree with you.
You probably got different faces coming up in your mind in terms of who those people were, right?
Lots.
Well, I think what you're speaking to, Bud, probably isn't game theory. It's probably more about using data as a basis of certainty so that they can, employ rules and structures that, make them feel better or suit their own interests. But game theory is something I think is more complex, which I love that. Like game theory is much more about understanding all the variables, how the variables interact at different situations, how these potential outcomes could create other results, how all the different outcomes could create different things, and then it's predictive in that way. So I love game theory in the sense of it's actually complex strategy, which I think is brilliant, and I don't think is actually what any managers are doing, because it's a very complicated system structure. And the more we were thinking like, game theorists do, I think that we'd actually be more intelligent. And then it's just how it's applied, right? And I find that it seems to be rarely applied well in terms of to the benefit of humanity. But unless it's like strictly a game, then it's quite fun, if it doesn't have any, real world costs. But yeah, I think that the complexity of it is valuable. And the mathematics of it are valuable because they're more complex calculations that I think are more real in terms of in any direction that we're actually kind of seeking to understand and predict and work with.
But one of the reasons I signed up today was like, I think, has game theory receded? Because like 20, 30 years ago, I worked in the military. I'm not a military guy, but, and they did actual game theory. I've said before, I've worked with actuaries and they really get into this stuff. But does anybody talk about game theory anymore? Because I think our whole world has just become more, Oprah's, well, it's my truth, right? That's a valid question. It doesn't seem to be a discipline. I never go to a client and they say, we got a game theory this, or we got to bring in a game theorist. Does it have any use today other than maybe military examples or something?
Yeah, if you look at some of the fundamentals, I think it got a good kick in the pants when John Nash came around, and so certainly it's you can go back to Sun Tzu in terms of using some of these principles 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Nash kind of brought it into the modern world. I think because we, to your point, Bud, we live in such glorious amounts of data, so you can play with things, you can look at things, you can model things. It's had its heyday, but the problem is you have to understand it. And so how many people in the world really understand some of the data science behind some of the stuff that they're looking at? It's if you jump on LinkedIn right now and look up people that know game theory, most of them will have some kind of academic or PhD or whatever expertise. And so it hasn't democratized itself to the point of some of the other things like a design thinking, where design thinking's been so well packaged for the universe that quite frankly, anybody in innovation or strategy is probably a design thinker, right?
Right. I also think that it's very hidden, but like I think game theory is prevalent. It's just hidden. It's not talked about as much because it's too complex. And then a lot of it is in the algorithms and in the behind the scenes tech that's being built. So there's not many people like, Sean said, that can actually understand it. So it isn't as popular because it's too complicated to actually discuss. And I think it's probably more powerful if it is hidden, particularly if you're designing a system and a game for your particular industry, that becomes secret sauce. So yeah, I think it's there.
That's true.
Very there. It's just we don't hear about it.
That's a good point. Making the secret sauce, right? Yep. It's got to be secret. Okay.
I think one of the benefits sorry, go ahead, Basir.
It kind of, I agree with all, I guess it's a wonderful way of how ideas come together, because in modeling simulation or in tabletop exercises, it is in a way a game theory. So it depends. Sometimes most of the designers put in a lot of hours, do the quantitative work, as you put it, operations research, but then it has to have a user-friendly interface to get the result of target audience. And numbers are the secret sauce. And then I've seen a lot of operations research students, PhDs and so forth. They were telling, when I've heard game theory 20 years ago, I thought, wow, that must be something really easy. And then they said, no, it's on the contrary. It's all numbers, it's all mathematics and so forth. Yeah. And then after seeing them in very certain miserable days, I said, I can never do that stuff. But I guess democratizing it is key to both for the concept to survive, but also perhaps become more novel and then evolve.
Yeah, I mean, you have less of a chance to be bamboozled in a game if you understand the rules that are played against it, right? So I think there's a couple of different books I'm going to share at the end that, in my mind, are really good examples of, just if people only read these 3 books, you'd probably understand a lot of the reason why we do some of the crazy irrational things that we sometimes do. I find in politics, generally, people vote against their best interest without them even knowing, right? And a lot of that's all about game theory too.
What's wrong with Kansas?
Well, and certainly if you look at, I guess if I'll call it postmodern game theory, they really struggled for decades on 2 different things in business. And the 2 things were, how do you deal with imperfect competition, right? Where you really don't, to I think the point Nick Owell was making earlier, you've got a stacked deck on one side, and it's really tough for these other people over here to ever succeed because it's imperfect. And the second thing they had to deal with was entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurs take such huge risks. If I told you, Bud, here's a business that you're going to invest your entire time, energy, perhaps money, and a lot of risk and reputation in, and oh, by the way, there's an 85% chance that it won't exist within 5 years from now. Would you take that risk?
Not much.
Well, guess what? A lot of people would, right? And so they had to really account for this crazy thing called entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Just continue on. We've talked about beautiful game. Here's John Nash's equilibrium, and so best way I can explain. And I don't know if anybody, Basir, anybody know what the Nash equilibrium is? Something that game theorists espouse a lot. And essentially it's one of 2 things I'd like to call it. It's the no regrets rule, right? At some point you're playing a game that whatever decision you've made, don't deviate from it, because any deviation from your strategy will end up being a suboptimal result. So whether it's non-deviation or no regrets, there's a term called Nash equilibrium. That's what it means within this space. You probably heard of prisoner's dilemma, right? You've got a different world situation here. You've probably seen it on Law and Order, where they have 2 partners in the crime and they put them in 2 different rooms and go, look, you've got these 2x2 scenarios where, if you both stay silent, you could serve a year. If you both betray the other one, you could both get 2 years. And if you betray the other guy and say it was all him, well, he'll get 3 years and you'll go free. So which do you do? Maybe I'm looking at the criminal mind that Nick Owell Stark is here. Which would you do to me if we got caught in a crime together here, Stark? Which one would you do?
Well, I'd have to think about it, but the thing is that I would think about, what I probably do, game theory, Sean, is I would probably talk to you first before, and I'd say, okay, if this scenario happens, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this choice. So I would back it up, and I'd get agreements beforehand. If I'm in this situation, I get this choice, and I'm going to, then we together would actually game theory it out. Like if I'm the one that gets caught versus you're the one that's caught, how can we help each other, or how can we most help ourselves? And then I'd make it more complex than this.
And you've introduced a new notion into our game just by saying that, the notion of trust, right? Can I trust you as an actor in this game that you're going to do what you say you're going to do? Because if I can't, then I know I could get 1 more year than I'll ever get in any other scenario.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it might be like, if we make an agreement, like if we both serve 1 year, then that's an agreement, and unless, we're not trustworthy. Or it's like one of us goes free, the other serves 3 years, and then we make a deal based on that. Like, okay, then you're going to give me $3 million for that, or whatever. I mean, there's so much. There's just this isn't factoring in the potential of agreements and collaboration. And then also you'd have to predict, like, if it wasn't trustworthy, then what? Well, then if it wasn't trustworthy, I'd probably do both serve 1 year. I mean, that's the most fair and reasonable that has the least consequences. Because here's the other thing in this is that if I choose one where I'm going free and you're serving 3 years, there's consequences to that decision into my future, depending on how much power you have. If you have no power, then you may not be able to do anything. But what if you gain power after the fact that I think you don't have any power? Well, once you gain power, you might wield that against me. So I'm also having to factor in, you know, the not just the cost as I see it now, but potential costs that I can't see. So I would definitely do both serve 1 year, unless there was like a prior agreement.
And I mean, I know we're bringing this up as a prison situation. My hope is we're never in this situation. It's plausible. It's very plausible. But I think a lot of times in business, this happens too, right? You said you're going to go in partnership together and you said you were going to do this, but you wanted to get all the benefits without any of the commitment or dollars or whatever you're putting into this partnership. This happens all the time in terms of business life where somebody tries to get the free ride of the other person, right? So that's
the other thing is I would probably take like, if I felt you weren't trustworthy, then I would betray you. And then if you didn't betray me, then I'd have to figure out a way to make up for that.
Yeah.
So, but if you did, so that'd be better. Both serving 2 years would be better. Like I would take the risk definitely that you'd betray me, because either way, that's better for me because I have the power to fix it. So I could say, okay, you were loyal. Oh, that was unexpected. Okay, now I better figure out how to make it up to you because you're loyal unexpectedly.
If you've ever
Sorry, please go ahead.
I was going to say, if you've ever seen the movie Social Network, I know I'm back on movies again, Bud, but if you've ever seen the movie Social Network, I think Zuckerberg has taken the exact approach you've just defined here, Nicole. It's like, yeah, I'm going to screw those twins over because it's better for me. Sure, we'll give them a little bit of stuff, but more of it was going to go to me. Basir, you're going to add something?
Also, we have to take into account that there are detectives who are interrogating them, and what are the interests of the detectives? I mean, do they want to throw both of those guys into prison, or do they want to just give them a fair shot of 1 year, and even the district attorney or the public prosecutor? So I guess somewhere in the future, it would be interesting to actually invite to get a law enforcement perspective and also a prosecutor's perspective, because I mean, obviously they wouldn't spill the beans, but then as far as decision making goes, you know, getting their perspective will also provide us some seriously good depth.
Well, that would be a different game, but this game right here is fixed, except for what comes previous. So that's, I was identifying, well, what comes previous to this game I can control, but as long as I'm in this game, it's fixed. We already know the outcomes. So we'd have to create another game for that scenario.
I see.
Which would be interesting.
And perhaps even dependent on the first game, right? Sometimes these game theories
Yeah.
are dependent and sequential to each other, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to throw us into a different.
All I know is my sister ratted on me and she got off and I got punished. Like,
hopefully
we
it was
had
nothing criminal. We're talking about children, right?
This is really interesting in terms of game theory, because I've often game theoried it out in terms of this situation with like siblings or with like speeding, because I'm like a super speeder. So I game theoried it out. Well, like I'll probably get got this many times a year, but that's only a fraction of how much I'm speeding. So so then I realized, okay, so I'm actually speeding far more. So my violation is much higher than what I'm actually getting caught for. And so I can just pay that price because it's worth it. Then that gives me license to speed this much time because I know I'm only going to get caught this amount of time. And I think it's similar with sibling. It's like, okay, I'm falsely being accused of my sibling this time, but how many times was I falsely accusing? So then you game theory it out and be like, well, I'm still winning, even though this one was bad. No, I'm still winning, or I'm losing and I need to change my strategy because it's adding up to not be, it's not adding up in my favor. So I need to fix my strategy.
Got it. Yeah.
I think there's a bit of Scottish in me. The first 3 years of me working full time, I worked at Procter & Gamble in Canada. And I parked at the side of the building because I thought the rates for parking underground were so egregious that as long as I didn't get more than 6 parking tickets a month, I was okay. And it worked great for the first 3 years. And I continued to use the rule ad nauseum, and I worked there for 7 years. The unfortunate part is like the penalty started going up. And I think the cops got on to all of us that were gaming the system.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
and then they changed the system. So
I hate it when they do that. I'm going to throw one more game at you. That's a very popular one in game theory space, Bud. Yeah, let's put it in these terms. And I've got some stats to back me up here. I'm giving you $1,000. You can take it all yourself. You can share it equally amongst us or do whatever you want with it. But I've just given you $1,000 as being part of our discussion today. What are you going to do?
I don't understand why I would do anything. You know, you've given me $1,000. Is that the rule?
I've said it's for this webcast. You can share it with everybody that was part of it, or you can not. It's totally up to you. What would you
Meaning,
do?
wait. Are you like what to do with the money itself or what actions as a result of the money?
What to do with the money itself?
Oh, well, yeah, you invest it.
Well, no, it's a decision that you got to make right now. It's like, you know what? Maybe there's the fair thing where it's like, you know, we're all part of this webcast. Maybe we deserve the money too. Or you say, no, you know what? I need it all for myself. Or you say, well, I'd like a little bit more money for myself and distribute it to Basir.
Oh, I would probably take it, invest it, and then share dividends.
But this seems to be seems to be we're sitting at a table and Sean's got $1,000 and there's nothing else included.
Let me put it
or
back
Muffet,
to your
or
sibling.
Muffet. I would do this. I would say, okay, I'm going to take half. You're going to take half. Let's both invest it and then share the dividends. And in a way of like creating another game, like we create another game, see who can actually make more money than the other.
It's getting complicated with you.
But if it's purely zero sum sitting there at the table and we're not making other games out of this, the question is, do I in any way share it or do I use it for myself? And why would I share it?
Yeah, well, I would. So this is the other complications. This is variables. If it was you, Sean, and me, and then one other person, and they say this person I knew was in need, then I would not share anything with you, but I would share with the other person because that's a different circumstance, a different calculation. And so generosity changes in terms of, you know, circumstantial need or what is the information that's available. So, and then I probably say that I say, well, I'm going to take it. I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to give some to this person. And I don't know, maybe I'll buy you a drink or something and let's see or whatever.
Let's go really elementary. Do all of you have siblings? I know I have one.
You do? I didn't even know you guys.
Yeah.
You have two siblings,
you
got
got
one first?
Nico, well, I know you're a family. You're from Kansas City. You got like a family of 12 or something, don't you?
Okay, first.
So you've got one sibling. Remember that moment? Remember that moment where your parents go, look, here's $10. Just get out of my face for a while and take your sister or your brother, right? So let's put it in that scenario where there's a variety store and your parents have just given you $10 and Bud, you're going into the variety store with your sibling. How are you meeting that money out?
Well, I probably, being me, I would probably share it as equally as I can, just for home peace.
Very good. Basir, so actually
I had
there.
Yeah, I had sibling rivalry, so I would have purchased the cheap ice cream and then got the expensive ice cream, and then the remaining money would have just pocketed it, and then yeah. So and also make sure that my sibling is happy that she had ice cream. So and then when she tells mom, she won't be able to tell that it's whether it's a cheap one and so forth. So I don't know.
I'm reading into your personality here. It's henceforward called the Haagen-Dazs versus Breyers rule, right? Yeah, no, I get it. Nico, well, what are you doing with your
I think it's always more complicated for me because if it's somebody I know versus somebody I don't know, I mean, and then you have the age thing. If I was 10,
well, they are your siblings.
You didn't have the complex system development. Like now as an adult, having that same situation, I would invest it in a different way because I want to maintain the strengths of those relationships because they're resources me for the future, that blah, blah, blah. At 10 years old, that brain capacity, I actually just shared because I'm super tight with my brothers. And there wasn't enough incentive for me not to share. But I could imagine myself in a different scenario where I wasn't close to my brothers and the relationship wasn't there and I was a different personality. I might have done it. And this is the whole point of game theory, right? The variables matter. The variables matter.
There's a lot of, I know in whatever game theory, there's a lot of branches in Stark's tree where it's just like, but then it depends on this, and then it depends on this, right?
I wouldn't, the current situation is that my older sister and I would get 50% each.
All right. Well, I will tell you, you fall into a rare part of the population, because they did this study with university students, and they found that 5% of them would share it gladly. 45% of them would share it a little, but by no means equally. And 50% of them would take the entire money themselves. And so I know university students, kind of a different economic strata, and depending on what kind of different kind of caveats that you put on it, and if there's any kind of future relationship involved. But for the most part, if there was no future relationship involved, a lot of people are taking the money themselves. So it's an interesting comment on human nature, perhaps. So I wanted to touch on one last thing before we kind of close on the topic. I just read an article today, and I think it was New York Times, on abundance versus scarcity, and how the comment on the article, I think the actual title of the article was something like, "We're reaching the end of abundance and the start of scarcity." And so depending on if you see the pie as being ever expanding or if it's contracting and contracting, doesn't it affect your ability to play this game and how you see it? Any thoughts, Nicole?
Well, I'm kind of predictable in my responses. I think that both mindsets are delusional. So abundance isn't real, and neither is scarcity. I mean, there is, there's of course, there's not always going to be more. And then it's also, there's always something present when we feel like there's nothing. So I don't agree with either of these mindsets, but I understand that most humans do. And I think that it is probably changing to more scarcity mindset, but I don't know, what was the question? Did you ask a specific question or just my thoughts on it?
Well, when you think even about our dictator game, right? And you look at a pie that has more to it, right? So a rising tide lifts all ships. Of course, I'm going to share more versus, wow, we're dropping into ourselves, and I'm going to be a little bit more suspect in terms of who I
just think it's contextual, and I think I don't like how we always make these simple binary, frameworks so that we can pick one or the other. It's like certain circumstances, a high tide rises all ship. Others, that's not true. And so I think the circumstances, it's very dependent on the context and the circumstance. So, but generally, I absolutely believe in generosity, which is different than an abundance mindset, because generosity would say, even though there's not much, there's still enough to share. So
any other prevailing thoughts on this? I know there's the belief, and then maybe how the world operates too, right? Because I certainly am a Canadian, so I can speak to a little bit to our political spectrum, where if somebody's on the right hand side of our spectrum in Canada, they're probably more likely to believe in, don't take too many risks, and the fact that, we probably don't have a rapidly expanding pie, and so being a little bit more conservative. The party's actually called progressive conservative, which seems like an acronym of terms, but and then there's liberal, right, which is like, well, no, the pie is always going to expand, and so let's spend a little bit more liberally and freely, and perhaps share more across things. So it's interesting even how this plays out in politics. Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is to do with, on the abundance part, I would think of an innovator, designer, creator. That really describes those characteristics. And scarcity is the free rider, or the person, or the lazy person who doesn't want to have the incentive to create. And because I've had experiences where there was collaboration, and then my mindset was abundance, and then obviously the other person went, because they are not creators, innovators, disruptors, they are not able to replicate or do what I do, or move into the same rhythm. So in that regard, they would just rather cash it out and run away. So first-hand experience, without going into details.
Yeah, no, it's good vernacular on those. I buy. Bud, you got any thoughts on abundance versus scarcity?
No, I struggle with this all the time. My behaviors are on the red side, but I firmly believe that in a lot of situations, resources are infinite, right? Like, so my behaviors are red, but my belief is kind of things are infinite.
Yeah, there's a real dichotomy there, right? Sometimes
they're
I feel
finite.
like some of the, just the practices of some of my most environmentally friendly friends, they will, they certainly
Right.
believe it. I don't think they don't believe it in terms of, look, there's a pie here that we need to be really cognizant of and make sure that we take care of it for future generations. That they do believe. The problem is, in a modern world, I don't know how you square that and jumping on 3 flights in a row to get to either a vacation or your next business talk or whatever, right? It's it feels like sometimes the behavior versus the belief might be in a different state of affairs on a game theory basis.
Yeah. I don't understand the purpose of you showing that that slide. Is that a game?
Well, I think just if I told you, look, we're going to split a pie that's 110 versus splitting a pie that's 90, you can certainly game theory that in terms of, okay, well, I want 60 for myself, so I'm going to keep 60. 60 and 110 pie doesn't seem so unfair. 60 and a 90 pie, well, you're getting double what the other person's getting, right? So there is an unfairness aspect to it. And I think if you look at tax systems and different structures, you may get to some of that game theory unfairness as well.
Yep. Okay.
The scarcity, just one sentence, the scarcity mindset in the end will lose, because a lot of the people who jacked up my ideas, I mean, then they created a certain, I basically followed through the issue through their respective systems and so forth. And in the long run, it has costed them more. I mean, yes, like short-term win versus long-term sustainable. And then, it's obviously for short-term, for reality, or just to keep on or cling on to what you have. The one on the right is good, but as a perspective and collaboration for future, the one on the left is a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's interesting, we've defined this as people. At certain times it's eras, right? There's certain eras where we go through pretty much societally, the Depression would have been a pie's getting smaller, gotta look out for myself, versus the roaring 20s would have been a little bit different as well. Just 3 resources. I've read 2 of these. I've heard from a colleague that the first one, The Art of Strategy, is a really good game theory guide to success in business and life. So I can't account for that personally. Certainly Taleb, and obviously wrote Black Swan, which Gray Swan is a cousin to. Really good one on skin in the game and just some of the hidden asymmetries in daily life, and just, some really good examples of where, you think you're making a fair decision, but you really aren't. And I really didn't know any of my poker playing friends could read a book, or all of them could.
Mine is different.
Oh,
my
you got?
the skin in the game, but it looks like a totally different cover than that one.
Yeah. You got the hard cover?
No.
You get the signed version, maybe.
I find it interesting that the one on the left talks about a game theorist, and then we get into it's Nicola's point that they talk about strategy.
Yeah.
So those that idea.
Game theory is the ultimate strategy. It's super complex, but I think that but strategy isn't always game theory.
Yeah.
But game theory is always strategy. That was my point.
And they converge on that front page there. Yeah, I know I know, but they put them in the same level there. I'm just saying, we've had that discussion up front as to strategy and game theory, but here they flow together. So if there's confusion, it's not just me.
Yeah, like any framework, it can be used for anything and nothing, depending on how you interpret it, right?
Like the word strategy, it has no definition.
I would implore people, though, try poker first of all. But if you don't, at least Maria Konnikova, sounds like a tennis player, right? But she was a world rank poker player, really good at it, and so she's taking some of the principles she's learned there, turn it into a book about the confidence game, which I've certainly improved my poker game by actually reading it. The unfortunate thing is everybody else at the same table that I play also read the book.
Also read the book.
Yeah. We got a whole bunch of different ventures going on in our guild. We've got a survey coming out on the pandemic in terms of where it all settles out. We just had a discussion this morning on producing a book together. And we have an ongoing piece in terms of doing some master classes toward the end of this year and early next year. And we've got our next one, number 43. It's interesting, we did number 41 and 42. We've done 40 here and we'll jump to 43. So there's no rhyme or reason to our number system, I suppose, here, but we're going to talk about heuristics, probabilities, and mental shortcuts next. And so that'll be an interesting one and somewhat related to this topic. And just announcement here today, we haven't mentioned the date. We said we're going to do this, but come October 20th, we are going to do a book festival. So we're going to find 8 authors that talk about different elements that the guild's interested in, and we're going to interview them. So yeah, put that in your calendars for October 20th. And we did something on hindsight and retrospection, number 41 here. It's all on Medium, so have a read of it as well. Just just because we've gone over the hour, but what did we learn today here, guys? I know Nicola loves this part of our discussion together. So, Bud, what'd you learn today?
Well, I just joined in. I've not ever joined in on these things, and I think it's great because there's such a limited number of people. I hope my participation didn't drag it down. I think a lot of you are more into the formality of game theory than I am. So I learned a lot. I learned the layering. I learned the complexity. I learned its strategy is a subset of this. So I love the discussion, and I'll try to join more. I can't join at 7. I just happen to be free now. And Sean, is this what you do with your life, is host all of these?
That is such a good question.
Oh my God, how do you do this?
I'll let that one sink in for a second. I don't know if I should cower away in a corner right now, or if I should. Yeah.
Well, do you give up your whole day and life to talking to people like us just to make us smarter?
Bud, in your case, yes, I do, because
To make
my
me
relationship
smart.
with you is so valuable. So,
Okay.
Basir, what did we learn today?
Obviously, how little I know about game theory. It is next. I mean, I will definitely have to watch and write down a lot of things. Nicole and yourself have been wonderful teachers. Most importantly, you don't have to have, obviously, to have an effect to develop game theories and strategies and so forth. You have to have quantitative skills, but nonetheless, you could always find a buddy of yours who is a math genius. So in that regards, it opens and obviously the more skill sets you have, the better. And most important of all, the element of deceptions and false signals, weak signals, and no signals also come into play. So we have to take that into account. It's not perfectly rational and honest world out there. Over.
That's a great sum up. Thank you for that. No, appreciate it. And Ms. Stark, what did we learn today?
I'm protesting this question, but I learned that you have 1, maybe 2 siblings, and that we have a similar rock, paper, scissors game.
I know, man, that's scary how similar it was. Like, I'm sure if we do the math, we'll go, wow, our brains have had mitosis of each other when we've come from the same stem, maybe. Ew. Maybe not. Well, just one quote, I guess, to leave us in terms of just, as you're looking at any kind of strategy or innovation or sense making or partnership or anything in either business or in your personal life, it comes down to understanding the interests of other people as well, right? I think there's a basic point here about what game theory is trying to get across, that sometimes, be they rational or not, they have their own kind of impetus in terms of what makes for a good decision. And so hopefully, you can avoid it just being a one-way decision. And I'll also add Warren Buffett's quote, "You can't make a good deal with a bad person," which if you go back to our prisoner's dilemma, that's what he might have been talking about.
Yeah, I like that.
Thanks
is
everybody.
awesome.
That was number 40. Appreciate it. Bud, Nicole, everybody. We'll be seeing you on the
Yeah,
other
bye
side.
you guys. Thanks for.
Knock it out at 7, Sean.
Chat.
Be good.